Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Signals Facebook Live. I am Genevieve Wood, and I'm joined here in our studios by Representative Mike Kelly from the great state of Pennsylvania. Congressman Kelly, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Genevieve. Good to be here.
Well, so November is National Adoption Awareness Month,
Yes.
and you have legislation you've introduced in the House that pertains to the whole issue of adoption. Before we get specifically into the legislation, let's talk about how big this population is. Am I right that there are about 400,000 kids today in foster care?
Yes.
How does that play out when it comes to adoption?
Well, I just think we don't have enough adoption agencies right now to give these children. And some of them, by the way, are children that have special needs. Mm-hmm. And those are the ones that are the hardest ones to place. And ironically, who steps up? It's always the faith-based people that say, I want that little boy, that little girl. I want that person. I want them to be part of our family. And it's always the faith-based people that step forward when there's a need. So I think we look at that, and there's a great opportunity right now for us to make sure that they don't move around in foster homes. Foster care is okay, but the most important thing for any child is to grow up in a family with a loving mother and father, and other brothers and sisters, by the way. In my own family, we have 20 nieces and nephews, my wife and I, and 5 of those children are adopted. And I keep trying to think now, which are the ones that are adopted? Because we just had Thanksgiving, and they're all the same. They're all the same. They're all part of our family. So that's the part. It's the loving part, I think, is incredibly important for children. They have to be included. They have to know they're loved. They have to know that there's parents that want to raise them and that they can grow up in that family.
Well, I think out of that 400,000 children that are in foster care, I think it's about 100,000, if I was looking at the numbers right, that are specifically in need of what they call forever family. These are children that aren't going to be reunited with their biological parents, and they're looking for homes. So people say, well, adoption's a great thing. Why are you all talking about it? Well, it's because it's under attack, if you will, right? You talked about faith-based adoption agencies and faith-based services that provide adoption services. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, has come in, I think it was earlier this year, I believe in September, and said, we don't think these agencies should be allowed to get funds from the government and provide these services if they are not also allowing children to be adopted by same-sex couples.
Right.
They've basically got a lawsuit going in Michigan. How does this impact the whole scope?
Well, here's what it impacts. When you don't have the access to the federal funds, in a lot of these agencies, faith-based, is the same as the other agencies. They need this funding to help get these children to homes. I find it ironic that the ACLU has decided to discriminate against people who say, look, we just want to make sure that they have a loving family, a loving couple. And we believe in the man and women as the parents. We're not saying other people can't do it another way. We're not saying that at all. We're just saying, why are you excluding us? Why are we not included when it comes to addressing a situation that really makes sense for America and makes sense for these young people who are coming up? And it's just so odd that right now, so they say, well, but see, you're not all inclusive, so we're going to exclude you. And we say, look, there's nothing in our legislation that excludes anybody. All we're saying is
everybody has access to the funds.
Right. And it doesn't make sense to say no because you believe that it has to be a parent, a woman, a man, that you're going to be excluded. That's not the way it works. That's never been that way in our country. And you look at this, I just find that it's so odd that people would pick up this challenge and say, no, we have to make an example of these people. They're either going to do it this way or they're not going to be able to do it at all. We're just the opposite. We're saying, no, just leave us alone. Let us do the way we believe, what we want to do as far as including people in. And the other agencies can do it. We're not saying they should be excluded, and I think that's the odd part.
Well, and we've seen this play out before in places like Boston, where Catholic Charities, for example, for years was a huge adoption service in that community, in that city. They had to quit providing adoption services because they were told you're no longer going to get any funds because unless you put children in same-sex couple homes as well. But all of these states and localities have agencies that do both. Right? I mean, so it's not as though a gay couple can't go and apply for adoption. They just can't do it maybe through Catholic Charities.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it doesn't make sense. It just, I keep going back to what I said earlier. Why are we being excluded? So the legislation that we're talking about, H.R. 1881, 11 senators on board with 38 members of the House, and that's going to get bigger. That'll grow to an even greater number. All we're saying is, why can't we protect our religious liberties? Why are we always the ones that are being excluded? Why are we being made like the object of, oh, they're terrible, they won't do this? We're saying, no, there's other agencies, your choice. In our case, this is our choice. We don't believe in same-sex couples. We believe that the child should be raised in a home by a mother and a father, and done that way. But for whatever reason, and who knows why, we're living in entirely different times. The world I grew up in, unfortunately, we don't get to go back to what we've always believed from day one. We're being viewed as something different, and the idea is, look, exclude them. Just make it impossible for them to participate.
Well, and as you said, ultimately, this isn't really about helping adoption agencies. I mean, we're all pro for that, but the reality is this is about ensuring that children aren't left behind. And my understanding from what I've read that you've written and others involved with this issue is that if you take out Catholic charities and other religious organizations that provide these services, considering many of them have been the ones historically for years that have probably done the most in terms of making adoption placements, you're actually keeping more children in foster care.
Absolutely. It's just so counterproductive. It goes against the grain in such a way that it's become kind of a cause that really wasn't a need. I mean, you didn't have to worry about it. And again, listen.
Well, is this not political correctness being legislated, if you will? I mean, the ACLU seems to be saying, we basically want to say, unless you're buying into the full LGBTQ, add another alphabet agenda, you're not going to get any funds. And so let's talk specifically about your legislation.
Yes.
So it's called the Child Welfare Provider Inclusion Act. And what would it do? How would it protect these faith-based institutions from suits like the ACLU or states passing laws banning such involvement by religious groups?
Well, I think by law, I mean, nobody should be able to discriminate because you don't believe in some of the things they believe in, or they don't believe in some of the things you believe in. When it comes to religious liberties, that's what America's always been about. I mean, we just came from Thanksgiving, and we look back to why did these folks come to America? It was for religious freedom. So we know that, and we accept that. But then all of a sudden, this has become a cause célèbre. And I believe it's just another one of those markers that people put down and say, here's where we are today. And I must be the first one to say, listen, if that's the way you feel, that's the way you feel. We're not attacking you. So why would you make it harder for a child to be adopted? Why would you make it more difficult? Why wouldn't you look at this and say, you know what, you have your set of standards, we have our set of standards. We're not going to deprive you of federal funds that help run these agencies at a time when we need more agencies, not fewer agencies, when we have people looking to adopt. Why would we make it a harder path for the child?
Right.
Not for the parents, but why harder for the child? And I just think, as Americans, we've always had big hearts. And there's nothing that we hold in greater esteem than children. We know that's our future, but we also know that they have to grow up in a loving home. We don't like the fact that, and I'm not criticizing foster care, but children are put with one family, then another, and then another.
It's never supposed to be the permanent solution, right? It's supposed to be a very temporary. So some states have passed laws trying to protect these groups.
Yes, they have.
Other states have basically passed laws in cities saying, no, if you discriminate against gay couples, and for example, you can't get any dollars. What would your legislation would do? What
it just prevents the federal government from depriving us of any of the funds. And the other thing, this is really, I think, critical. You know, the president was very clear early on about religious freedoms. He has the ability right now, through executive order, he could actually put this into effect. Much like the Mexico City policy, and this was where we are today is because President Obama made this decision for the exclusion, and we're saying, wait, okay, so President Obama made a statement. I didn't agree with it, but he did it anyways. We now have Donald Trump in there. He can also now say, you know what, much like the Mexico City policy, when it comes to abortions, we can also do this with this Inclusion Act. We can make sure that this funding, this federal funding, is going to help all agencies, and none of the agencies are excluded because of their religious beliefs. Number one in America has been our religious beliefs. We are always allowed to believe and to practice our religion in a free way. This one just kind of a slap in the face. And again, I just think it's a marker to say, look, we were able to stop this. To say you were able to stop children getting adopted by a loving family. You think that's a victory? That's not a victory. So
final question. If people say, well, how significant is this? I mean, is this something we need to be concerned about today? We know the ACLU filed this case back in September. It's making its way through the courts. Again, this was against the state of Michigan, but it would have huge repercussions across the country. How quickly does something, in your judgment, need to happen? I mean, this legislation, the president acting, what's the timeline look like?
You know, I believe in a case like this, time is of the essence. And when I talk to folks, they always say, well, how could I help? Here's how you can help. You write your legislator. You call your legislator. You express your feelings on it. You say, listen, this is something that doesn't make sense to us. We don't want this to happen. I'm afraid with the Michigan piece, it could become a domino effect. And then it would really gain momentum. And that's hard. Once that gets going that way, it's hard to pull back. I believe if you stop it early on, you stop it. So for us, as private individuals, people of faith, you have to have faith that your beliefs, your heart makes a difference. Every single one makes a difference. But it's getting on the phone, it's writing letters, it's making sure that you call these talk shows. Call in and say, do you know this is going on right now? Do you know people of faith are being excluded from federal funds because they believe that it shouldn't be same-sex marriage? That's the only reason they're being excluded. And so I'm just saying, you know what? This is your time. This is who we are as a people. And this is our opportunity. And you can't have a blind eye or a deaf ear to what's going on in America right now. This is a huge issue, and we have to, all of us, and I don't care how people vote or how they're registered, just look into your heart and you tell me that an agency should be deprived of making sure a child gets a loving home because of their religious beliefs. That is an incredible step down for America. I just think our religious freedom is at issue right now. It's not just this issue. There'll be more.
It's one.
We need to stop it now, and we need to let our legislators know that we're watching and we're aware. And then you get that thing where you call your friends, your neighbors, your relatives. I can't think of a better time than around the Thanksgiving table last week. I know people said, well, one thing you shouldn't discuss at Thanksgiving is politics.
This is a good thing in politics.
But if you come to my house, it's all politics. It's all politics.
Congressman Mike Kelly, thank you very much for what you're doing on this issue. Thank you for being here and sharing with us. And we've been following this story on the Daily Signal, so if you want to learn more about it, you can go to dailysignal.com. We've got links under our video here pointing back to stories on this. In the Washington Examiner today, one of our friendly competitors out there, there was a great article on this where you're quoted, and they tell more of the story so you can get more information on this. Again, it's the Child Welfare Provider Inclusion Act. Congressman Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania is the sponsor, and it's all part of National Adoption Awareness Month that we're talking about it. Thank you again.
And for all our viewers, it's up to each one of us. It's time to act. It's all right to sit and talk about things, but there's a time for action. Now is the time for action. So please join us. Let's make sure we protect our religious beliefs. Thank you. Thanks, Jim B.
Thank you. And thanks, everybody, for joining us here on the Daily Signal's Facebook Live. We will see you back here next time.